It happened in less than 60 seconds. One denied photo. One brutal moment of silence. And just like that, Meghan Markle's entire Hollywood comeback campaign shattered on the floor like a dropped designer clutch. She had planned for this night down to the last eyelash. The dress, the lighting, the camera angles, even the exact moment she'd accidentally glide into the same shot as Margot Robbie and Timothée Chalamet. Everything was prepped, polished, choreographed. But in the end, no one called her forward. No flashbulbs fired. No arms waved her in. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because this time, Hollywood didn't just ignore Meghan Markle. It erased her. And when she realized it, when the truth hit her like a wave of freezing champagne, she broke. Not privately, not behind closed doors, but in front of stylists, publicists, A-listers, and 3 cameras pointed exactly where she didn't want them to be. The tears came fast. The panic even faster. Because this wasn't just a party. This was the Marty Supreme premiere, an ultra-elite, no-press-list event whispered about weeks in advance, hosted by a mysterious indie magnate who'd somehow wrangled half of Hollywood to show up, suit up, and pose together for a photo that was already being dubbed the shot of the decade. And Meghan? She thought she was going to be in it. She thought it would be her big comeback moment. But what she didn't know was that someone behind the scenes was already working overtime to make sure that never happened. Now let me ask you this. Can you imagine what it feels like to be the person who used to stop traffic, only to realize that now, no one's even looking your way? To show up thinking you're the star, and find out you're not even on the list? This is the story of what really happened at the Marty Supreme premiere. The backstage whispers, the snub, the tears, the power plays, and the one quiet, cutting sentence someone was overheard muttering as Meghan Markle stood just feet from the photo wall, trembling in a $16,000 gown. She doesn't belong in this picture. Let's rewind a bit. For the last 6 months, Meghan Markle has been in what insiders quietly call visibility rehab. You've probably noticed it. The sudden increase in curated appearances, the calculated interviews, the oddly timed charity cameos, the royal-tinged photo ops. This wasn't random. This was strategy. Because after the Spotify deal crumbled into dust, the Archetypes podcast flopped, and the South Park episode cut deep enough to draw actual PR blood, Meghan's entire brand needed resuscitation. And fast. Her public image had become a contradiction. On one hand, she was still clinging to royal prestige, hovering just enough around titles and palace gossip to keep the public curious. But on the other, she was desperately chasing Hollywood relevance, pitching shows, shopping memoirs, clinking glasses at daytime fundraisers in Beverly Hills. It was no secret. Meghan needed a moment. A photo. A headline. Something viral. And then came the Marty Supreme premiere, held at a secret Art Deco theater in Westwood. The event had no official sponsor, no branded step-in repeat, and no press access. It didn't need it. The attendees were the press. Or rather, the people the press fawned over. Zendaya, Austin Butler, Jennifer Lawrence, Ryan Gosling, Margot, Timothée, Kate Blanchett, Anya Taylor-Joy, Florence Pugh, Andrew Garfield. Every name on the Oscars shortlist, all in one place. The Marty Supreme premiere wasn't just a screening. It was a statement. If you were in the shot, you were in the inner circle. And if you weren't, well, you didn't exist. Meghan had her team working on the invite for weeks. According to leaked emails from a source close to her publicist's office, Meghan made it very clear that she needed placement priority. She wanted to be seated within camera view of major A-listers. If there was a group photo, which there always is at these kinds of premieres, she wanted central positioning. But here's the thing about Hollywood. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the person who says nothing who holds the knife. And in this case, someone said nothing. Someone made sure the guest list never had Meghan's name near the core group. Someone ensured she wouldn't be in that photo. And they didn't have to tell her to leave. They just let her stand there alone. There's something uniquely cruel about being seen and ignored. As Meghan stood on the carpet, cameras flashing just feet away from her, she smiled. A big, polished, practiced smile. She raised her chin. She posed. She looked left, then right. Waiting for the wave. Waiting for someone, anyone, to say, Meghan, over here. It didn't come. The cameras never turned. The photographers never called her name. Instead, they called out, Zendaya, Margot, Timothy. It was like watching a spotlight shift and realizing you're no longer inside it. Worse, like realizing the spotlight was never pointed at you to begin with. Meghan tried to push through. Eyewitnesses say she attempted to naturally drift closer to the A-list cluster near the center backdrop. But a well-dressed man, one of the event's handlers, stepped in subtly, placing himself between her and the frame. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just stood there. That's when it happened. One journalist, whose lens caught the moment in full clarity, later described it as one of the most brutal nonverbal rejections I've ever seen in Hollywood. Meghan's smile faltered. Her eyes darted. And then her jaw clenched. You could almost see the internal panic. This was supposed to be the moment. Instead, it was a meltdown waiting to happen. Let's talk about the stakes here. You see, to the public, this was just a premiere. But to Meghan, it was a relaunch. Her personal brand had taken a beating. Archewell's financial questions swirling online. Netflix demanding results from new content pitches. Critics mocking her royal air in non-royal settings. Friends and collaborators slowly distancing themselves. The premiere was her chance to rewrite the narrative. A single photo with the right group could have flooded the internet, reinserted her into the prestige conversation, landed her on the covers of fashion blogs and celebrity think pieces. Instead, what the public got was a whisper, a rumor, a grainy clip of her dabbing her eyes behind a velvet curtain, and one leaked line from an anonymous publicist allegedly uttered moments after Meghan was turned away from the photo wall. She should have stayed royal. Now she's just extra. Ouch. In the minutes that followed, everything unraveled. A PR assistant scrambled to contact event organizers. Harry, who had stayed back to avoid the spotlight, was seen arriving late and visibly tense. Text messages flew across publicist circles. Journalists quietly made notes, and one celebrity stylist was overheard whispering, "She's going to spin this. Just watch." But could it be spun? Not when the one thing Meghan needed, visual evidence of inclusion, never came. There were no smiling selfies, no group shots, no soft-focus Vogue candidates, only silence. And then the tweet started. We'll get to that. But before we move forward, pause and consider something. What does it really mean to be snubbed in Hollywood? Not told no, not explicitly denied, but excluded without confrontation. That's the darkest kind of rejection. Because it's quiet, it leaves no fingerprints, and it robs you of the one thing fame needs to survive, visibility. So ask yourself, was this accidental? Or a masterclass in silent sabotage? Because what happened next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Accidental or orchestrated? That question hung in the air like perfume on velvet. Subtle, lingering, uncomfortable. Because when it comes to Meghan Markle, the line between coincidence and calculation blurs fast. Was it just bad luck that she wasn't in the biggest Hollywood group photo of the year? Or was someone quietly and brilliantly pulling the strings to make sure she never even made it to the edge of the frame? Let's rewind to the days before the Marty Supreme premiere. Because this wasn't just another red carpet. This was Meghan's Trojan horse, and she was determined to ride it straight back into the kingdom of Hollywood power. You've probably seen the headlines over the past year. The desperation glow-up, the PR reinvention arc, the endless speculation that Meghan Markle was preparing a soft reboot of her personal brand. But what most people didn't realize was how high the stakes really were. This wasn't about fame anymore. This was about relevance. Reclaiming it, preserving it, clawing it back from a media ecosystem that had slowly started tuning her out. Because despite all the interviews, the tell-alls, the docuseries, the books, and the podcasts, something wasn't landing anymore. The public wasn't biting the way they used to. And Meghan? She felt it. Deeply. How do we know? Leaked internal strategy notes from a former Archewell consultant. Yes, we're talking real documents. Described 2025 as the make or break visibility year for Meghan. A period of controlled reintegration into elite social spaces. Translation? Get Meghan seen, but only in the right places. No more C-list charity gala appearances. No more awkward product placements. This time, the comeback had to be glossy, aspirational, headline-stealing. And what better place to launch that than the buzziest premiere in the entertainment world? So what exactly was the Marty Supreme premiere? On the surface, it was the debut of an avant-garde art film directed by the notoriously secretive genius Arlo Kincaid. Think Kubrick meets Nolan with a dash of Wes Anderson. His films were whispered about more than they were seen. But it wasn't the movie that drew the A-listers. It was the photo, the moment, the unspoken implication that if you were there, you were relevant. This was the unofficial launch of award season. No paparazzi, no carpet interviews. Just curated chaos and perfect lighting. An insider described it like this. It's like the Met Gala and a Vanity Fair after-party had a secret baby, but only told their favorite children. And Meghan Markle wanted to be that favorite child again. In the weeks leading up to the premiere, Meghan's team went into overdrive. According to one fashion house assistant, who has since gone anonymous for fear of backlash, Meghan was trying on custom couture options as early as 3 weeks before the event. 3 weeks. For a single premiere. She wasn't even confirmed to be on the final invite list yet. But that didn't matter, because Meghan was betting on her presence being inevitable. In a now-deleted text thread allegedly leaked by a frustrated stylist, Meghan wrote, "It's just a formality. Once they see I'm coming, they'll move things around. Let that sink in. This wasn't a humble RSVP. This was a maneuver. A bet. A gamble. One built on the belief that Meghan's name still carried enough weight to make the Hollywood walls part like the Red Sea. But this time, they didn't. So what was the plan? How exactly was Meghan going to reclaim her crown on that very specific night? Sources close to her PR firm say there was an entire tiered strategy in place. 1. Image control. Meghan's glam team was hand-selected from stylists who specialized in prestige minimalism. The goal? Avoid anything too thirsty, too flashy, too obvious. Think. Understated elegance with a hint of royal nostalgia. Every detail, from her Cartier earrings to the slight waves in her hair, was chosen to say, "I belong here," effortlessly. 2. Media echo. Freelance photographers were quietly tipped off. Not the paparazzi, but the neutral ones hired for fashion coverage. They were told Meghan might appear and should be photographed in ways that suggest inclusion, not intrusion. 3. Social media timing. Meghan's team had multiple Instagram drafts ready, caption variations of an unforgettable night celebrating art, film, and community. These posts were scheduled for timed release in the hours after the group photo went live, ensuring that Meghan's appearance would ride the algorithmic wave. But there was one thing Meghan's team couldn't control: the actual photo call. And that's where it all went wrong. Back to the night itself. Meghan's arrival was timed, down to the minute, to overlap with the core group of stars. Zendaya, Margot Robbie, Timothy Chalamet, Kate Blanchett. It wasn't accidental. It was a tactic. If she arrived too early, she'd look like she was trying too hard. Too late, and she'd be irrelevant. So they aimed for the collision point. The moment all stars would funnel toward the centerpiece wall for the iconic group shot. Except something was off. The moment she stepped out of the car, there was confusion. Staffers scrambled to find her name. Security whispered. Wristbands were missing. And then the photographer line shifted. Almost consciously, the energy changed. One witness said, "It was like watching a flock of birds move in the sky and realizing you weren't part of the pattern." Meghan smiled through it. At first, that big, shiny, trained Hollywood smile. The one you wear when you're trying to pretend the house isn't on fire behind you. But insiders say her publicist's face told a different story. He was panicking, because at that moment, Meghan's name was not on the confirmed center frame list. And in these kinds of elite events, that list is everything. Why? Because in Hollywood, photos aren't just memories. They're currency. They get picked up by fashion blogs, by Vogue, by Getty, by Wire Image. They fuel brand partnerships, award show invites, magazine covers. One photo can launch an actor. One absence can bury a career. So when Meghan realized she wasn't being guided to the central group, when no one from production motioned her toward the VIP cluster, everything in her snapped into hyperdrive. Eyewitnesses say she tried to edge closer naturally. Just a step, then another. But then the handler. Tall, silent, intentional. He wasn't rude. He didn't raise his voice. But he stood there, perfectly in place to block any move Meghan made toward that all-important frame. The message? Unmistakable. You're not in this picture. Here's where it gets emotional. Because no matter what you think about Meghan Markle, love her, hate her, find her fascinating or exhausting, there's something undeniably human about the moment someone realizes the door they thought was open just closed in their face. She froze, just for a second, then turned, then smiled, then disappeared behind a velvet partition. But the cameras? They caught every second. And the silence from the photographers? Deafening. You know how you can sometimes hear a lack of sound? That sharp, empty hum of expectation collapsing? That's what it sounded like. Meghan Markle, former royal, global figure, would-be media mogul, stood outside the moment she thought would define her comeback. She thought she had played the game right. She thought she was walking into a spotlight. But instead, she walked straight into a trap. A glimmering, brutal, velvet-lined trap. And what happened once she stepped behind that curtain would leave her team scrambling, her PR strategy in flames, and Harry making a furious call to a Netflix executive in the middle of the night. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What happens when you step out of the car and no one cares? That's the nightmare Meghan Markle walked into. No screaming fans. No swarming press. No camera frenzy. Just one muted click. A handful of confused glances. And a brief, flickering moment of silence so thick it could cut through bone. You see, Hollywood premieres operate like high-pressure catwalks. Every entrance is timed, every pose choreographed, every flash a coded message. And if you miss that window, if you misstep by even 1 second, you don't just fade into the background. You vanish. Meghan's SUV pulled up precisely at 8:43 p.m., coordinated to coincide with the arrivals of Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet. She wore a crimson Valentino custom gown that hugged every curve. Its slit daring but tasteful, her jewelry understated but expensive. Harry was dressed in a tailored tux from Dior, black on black, no tie. Classic. Safe. Invisible. And that might have been the first problem. The doors opened, and for one breathless moment, Meghan stood poised on the curb, smiling like she'd already won. Her posture screamed confidence. Her eyes scanned for the lens. But the lens never turned. Let's break down what happened second by second. 8:43 and 10 seconds p.m., Meghan steps out first. She takes a graceful half-step toward the main entry. No flashbulbs go off. 2 photographers lower their cameras. 8:43 and 14 seconds p.m., a security guard squints at her wrist. She has no visible access band. Meghan points toward her team with a calm but clearly annoyed gesture. An assistant jogs forward holding a laminated pass. 8:43 and 17 seconds p.m. Behind her, Zendaya's SUV pulls up. The crowd erupts. Cheers ripple across the barricades. Phones shoot into the air. A wave of camera flashes begins like a storm rolling in. 8:43 and 21 seconds p.m. Meghan's face changes. The smile flickers. Her hand tightens on Harry's. She glances to her left, where the velvet carpet path splits. One side leads to the standard guest entrance. The other leads to the VIP cluster. 8:43 and 24 seconds p.m. She heads toward VIP. That's when the confusion began. It started small. A glance. A clipboard. A question muttered too quietly to be polite. Then, like a chain reaction, the rejections began rippling outward. A clipboard handler quietly intercepts Meghan's assistant. They're not on the main sequence. The assistant's smile freezes. What do you mean? We confirmed. The handler frowns. Confirmed for entry, not for the wall. Translation, you're allowed to attend. But you're not meant to be seen. And in Hollywood, that's worse than not being invited at all. Back at the entrance, Meghan was stalling. Deliberately. You could almost see the strategy playing out in real time. Stand tall. Keep smiling. Angle slightly toward the photographers. Wait for recognition. Let someone else, a star, a host, a director, notice you and call you over. Then the whole dynamic changes. Only no one did. Not Zendaya. Not Margot. Not Timothy. Not even the event's co-producer, who walked past within arm's reach, eyes locked ahead. That's when Meghan made a miscalculation. She started walking forward anyway. And in that moment, just as she approached the designated photo area, it happened. A tall man in a dark tailored jacket stepped sideways. Not aggressively. Not rudely, just firmly, and his presence alone was enough to halt her movement. Eyewitnesses say he didn't even look at her. He focused on something in the distance, like she wasn't there. But his placement was clear. His message undeniable. You don't belong in this frame. Harry leaned in, said something under his breath. Meghan nodded, a little too quickly. Her eyes darted. From her body language, you could tell the question racing through her mind. Do I smile through this? Or do I make a scene? But then came the cruelest part. Just behind her, the stars lined up. And the flashbulbs exploded. The group photo was happening. Live, unfiltered, electric. The very image she'd orchestrated her entire attendance around. And she wasn't in it. She was standing just out of frame, blocked by a handler, watching it unfold. Like a guest at her own wedding, locked outside. One publicist standing nearby reportedly muttered into their phone. She just got photogated. What's that mean? It's an industry term. Used when someone gets physically or logistically blocked from appearing in a critical publicity shot. It happens to up-and-comers, has-beens, people who were almost famous, but rarely to former royals. That's what made this different. In those agonizing moments, Meghan made a call. She turned, walked behind a curtain, slipped into the private hallway just off the main carpet. Her assistant followed quickly. Harry hesitated, scanning the crowd like he still expected someone to fix it. But no one did. The message had already been delivered. Loud, clear, silent. Inside the hallway, that's when things really started unraveling. Meghan reportedly burst into tears. Not dramatic sobs, not wailing, but that painful, breathless, can't-speak kind of crying. One assistant was seen blotting under her eyes with a makeup sponge. Another handed her a phone. She shook her head. It's too late, she whispered, voice trembling. They've already posted it. Because just outside that velvet curtain, the photo had already gone live. The biggest moment of the premiere. The shot of Zendaya, Margot, Chalamet, Lawrence, Gosling, Blanchett, and more, shoulder to shoulder, laughing, shimmering under golden light. And Meghan? Nowhere to be seen. Let's pause for a moment. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine putting months into preparing for one picture, only to be cut out at the last second? To be literally blocked from the moment you curated your entire narrative around, and then watch as it goes viral without you? That's the kind of humiliation that doesn't just bruise ego. It shatters strategy. This wasn't a failed red carpet moment. This was a public relations car crash. And Meghan knew it. Her face, according to a leaked snap taken through the curtain, said it all. Tight jaw, shaky smile, eyes glistening, shoulders held too high, like she was trying to keep herself from crumbling. Harry reportedly took the phone from her assistant and made a furious call. Who the hell approved this list? He barked, audibly enough for at least two staffers to hear. You told us she'd be positioned center group. You told us that. There was a pause. A long one. Then Harry's face changed. His hand dropped. He said nothing else. Meghan turned to him. What did they say? Harry shook his head. It's not their event. They said they don't control the photography. And with that, the last thread snapped. Because that was the brutal truth. This wasn't a Netflix event. It wasn't a Spotify partnership. It wasn't a Sussex-produced initiative. This was a night Meghan had invited herself into, and the hosts had simply chosen not to stop her. Until the lens mattered. Until the flashbulb started. Until it came time to draw the invisible circle of inclusion. And she found herself just outside it. What followed next was chaotic. Paparazzi circling outside got wind that Meghan had cried backstage. Within minutes, a cryptic tweet went live. Former royal snubbed hard at Marty premiere. Crying in corridor. Whole thing on tape. Hashtag cold shoulder. It was quickly deleted, but not before 4,000 people retweeted it. And that was only the beginning. Because within hours, something else would leak. Something caught in the corner of a blurry backstage video. Something Meghan never wanted anyone to hear. And what came next would escalate the entire night from awkward faux pas to full-blown industry scandal. No one said no. They just didn't say anything at all. That's how a Hollywood insider described it. There was no shouting, no scandalous outburst, no dramatic finger-pointing, just silence. A cold, careful, calculated silence. And for Meghan Markle, it cut deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. Because this wasn't a royal scandal playing out in the UK press. This wasn't a Netflix documentary edited for sympathy. This was real-time rejection in the most brutal, polished, and unmistakably intentional form. And the world saw it. Not through words, but through what was missing. Let's talk about what Meghan hoped for, what her entire night was built around. One moment, one photo, one perfectly timed entrance into the tightest circle of Hollywood relevance. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Her team had pitched the appearance as a quiet gesture, a nod to her supposed return to creative roots, a celebration of storytelling and inclusion. But behind the PR curtain, it was more than that. This was a chess move, a visual claim that Meghan belonged shoulder to shoulder with the biggest stars in the world, that she wasn't a former royal, or a controversial celebrity, or a failed podcaster, that she was still one of them. But Hollywood didn't bite. Instead, it ignored her. The cold shoulder began even before the cameras rolled. Eyewitnesses spotted Meghan in the cocktail pre-lounge, circulating carefully, scanning the room, choosing targets. Margot Robbie, engaged in deep conversation, didn't acknowledge her. Jennifer Lawrence smiled politely, then turned back to her stylist. No interaction. Austin Butler, too busy laughing with Zendaya and Chalamet. And the most shocking one? A-list fashion muse Anya Taylor-Joy reportedly looked Meghan up and down and said nothing. Let that settle. This wasn't a crowd of strangers. These were the people Meghan had once shared Vanity Fair parties with. The same people who, just a few years ago, would have rushed to greet her, hug her, pose with her, post about her. Now, not even a wave. The industry had spoken. Not loudly, not cruelly, but unmistakably. You're not in anymore. But it was how they did it that twisted the knife. You see, Hollywood doesn't scream at you when it wants you gone. It doesn't blacklist you with emails or block your number. It just stops looking your way. And that's exactly what happened to Meghan. As the core A-listers were guided toward the step and repeat for the group photo, Meghan tried to subtly position herself nearby, just in case someone waved her in. She didn't ask directly. She didn't plead. She simply stood close enough to be seen and waited. But no one turned. No one invited. Not one outstretched hand. Not one whispered, "Come join us." And when the cameras started flashing, Meghan was left standing behind a velvet barrier, a ghost in a sea of stars. One photographer later described the moment on a podcast, anonymously, of course. She looked like she wanted to be asked. She had that look, the smile that's half ready, like she's bracing for the nod. But it never came. And another added, "It was awkward. Everyone noticed her. No one said anything. It was like we'd all silently agreed she wasn't part of this shot." Now here's where it gets dark. Just as the group photo wrapped and the stars began to disperse into the main theater, Meghan stepped forward again, this time toward an old friend. Or rather, someone she thought was still a friend. An award-winning actress she'd once dined with in Toronto during the Suits years. Someone who had, at one time, called Meghan refreshing and grounded. Meghan smiled, extended a hand lightly, said her name. And the actress? She blinked, nodded curtly, and moved on. That moment, captured in a blurry background shot, would go viral within hours. Because Meghan's face said it all. The mask cracked. Just a fraction. But it cracked. She wasn't just excluded. She was denied recognition. And that's when her composure truly began to slip. Backstage, behind the heavy curtains, Meghan's assistant offered water, blotting paper, a suggestion to leave early. Harry was pacing, checking his phone, calling contacts, rereading the guest list email for the 100th time. There must have been a mistake, he said aloud, over and over. But there wasn't, because Meghan's name had been on the invite list, just not on the photo list. And in this business, that's not an oversight. That's a decision. Meanwhile, social media had already picked up the scent. One influencer, attending as a +1 to a rising director, posted a now-deleted Instagram story from the venue, captioned, "A certain duchess not getting invited to the photo wall is the Hollywood shade I live for." Another account, known for celebrity gossip blind items, posted this. "She wore red. No one saw red. Poetic, no?" Twitter threads exploded. Reddit gossip subs flared up. And then, the clip surfaced. Shot from behind the curtains, the footage was grainy, low-res, but unmistakably real. It showed Meghan, head tilted down, blinking rapidly as a stylist dabbed her cheeks. Behind her, an assistant whispered something. Meghan's shoulders stiffened. She mouthed the words, I don't understand. Then, just before the clip cut out, a second voice entered the frame. Female. Sharp. Unapologetic. And it said, "She always does this." Those 4 words sent the internet into a frenzy. Who said it? Were they talking about Meghan's emotions? Her expectations? Her meltdown? Speculation ran wild. Some said it was a stylist from another celebrity team. Others claimed it was a well-known PR fixer. One theory even suggested it came from a member of Meghan's own entourage. Regardless of the source, the implication was clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. And for Meghan Markle, that's the most dangerous narrative of all. Because once Hollywood decides you're difficult, too emotional, too demanding, too self-important, it doesn't cancel you. It just stops inviting you in. It ghosts you. Professionally, socially, permanently. And no amount of royal titles or Netflix contracts can change that. Now, here's where the contradiction hits hardest. Back in Montecito, Meghan's brand narrative is all about strength, resilience, and rebirth. But that night, what the world saw was vulnerability. Unvarnished, uncontrolled, unfiltered. A woman who wanted desperately to belong, and realized too late that she no longer did. And the kicker? Hollywood wasn't mocking her. It wasn't cackling or clapping or gossiping behind her back. It was simply ignoring her. And that, in this town, is the harshest fate of all. So what did Meghan do next? Well, she didn't storm out. She didn't make a scene. She waited, regrouped, and began whispering to her team. Plan B was already forming. A new narrative, a new statement, a new spin. Because one thing's for sure, Meghan Markle was never going to let this be the final word. But what came next would make the snub look like a warm-up act. Because as she sat in the shadows, trying to control the fallout, someone inside the event had already leaked the footage to the press. And the headlines that would follow? Even her strongest allies wouldn't be able to ignore them. What do you do when the plan you built your whole night around collapses, and everyone sees it? If you're Meghan Markle, you don't run. You don't scream. You regroup. But sometimes, even Plan B can't save you, especially when it's already too late. Because while Meghan was wiping away tears behind a velvet curtain, the photo she dreamed of had already gone viral, without her. And as she stood in that darkened hallway, lip gloss smudged, gown wrinkled at the seams, mascara barely holding, it became clear. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was a full-scale unraveling. And there was no script for what came next. Let's rewind again. 30 minutes earlier, Meghan had stepped onto that carpet with full-force strategy. She was supposed to float into the scene, stand near Margot Robbie, laugh with Jennifer Lawrence, maybe even pretend to bump into Timothée Chalamet. Oh wow, what a surprise. All of it choreographed, down to the angle of her left shoulder and the slight turn of her wrist for the cameras. Even the lip gloss she wore, a high-shine rose pink by Victoria Beckham Beauty, was chosen for its emotional impact, according to one stylist. It was meant to evoke intimacy, softness, approachability. But behind that curtain, after being left out of the shot, Meghan was anything but approachable. She was trembling. An assistant offered her a phone. Another offered water. No one said the obvious, that she had been cut out, snubbed, left in the cold by an industry that had once opened every door to her. Let's pause here. This moment wasn't just emotional. It was symbolic. Because for all the power, poise, and positioning Meghan had cultivated, she was still, at her core, a woman standing in a hallway, asking herself a crushing question. Why didn't they want me? And isn't that the question we all fear? Not being hated, not being judged, just being irrelevant. But Meghan wasn't done. Behind that velvet curtain, a new plan began forming. Quietly, desperately. Enter Plan B. According to sources close to her publicist team, within 10 minutes of the red carpet rejection, Meghan had instructed her assistant to contact a friendly outlet, a glossy magazine that had once featured her as a modern muse. The goal? Reframe the night. Release a controlled narrative. Something like, Meghan Markle made a surprise appearance at the Marty Supreme premiere, choosing to keep a low profile and support emerging voices from behind the scenes. Sounds classy, right? Only one problem. No one was buying it. Why? Because the footage was already out there. The tears. The blocked photo op. The "she always does this" whisper in the background. You can't spin a private, composed appearance when the world's already seen your breakdown. And just as her team began crafting captions, writing pre-approved statements, and preparing a drop to page 6, another bomb dropped. A second video. This one sharper, closer, more damning. Shot from the backstage holding area, it captured Meghan standing alone, shoulders hunched, phone to her ear, eyes locked on the event screen where the A-list photo was being played on loop. And then she muttered something. 2 words. Caught clearly. Unbelievable. Sabotaged. The internet latched on instantly. Sabotaged? By who? The event organizers? A rival actress? A palace insider? Harry himself? The theories exploded across platforms. Reddit threads ballooned. TikTok creators dissected her lip movements frame by frame. Twitter was flooded with hashtags. Hashtag Meghan snubbed. Hashtag red carpet revenge. Hashtag sabotagegate. And just like that, Meghan's quiet attempt to salvage the night became the very thing that made it worse. Plan B wasn't just doomed. It was detonated. Because nothing kills a controlled narrative faster than unsanctioned footage. And worse, she wasn't the only one being dragged. Harry, who had been mostly invisible during the event, was now being criticized for his absence in the key photo, his disinterest during the chaos, and his slouchy, disconnected body language on the carpet. One commentator went viral with this savage line. He looked like he knew it was a mistake, but was too afraid to say it. Brutal. Back in the hallway, Meghan was panicking. Her assistant's voice was tight. PR agents were now speaking in code. One was overheard saying, "We need to bury this. Right now." Another replied, "It's uncontainable. She needs to leave, quietly." But Meghan didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not like this. She had one more shot in mind. According to sources, Meghan then suggested what can only be described as a sympathy insertion. The idea? Have Harry accidentally walk into one of the post-premiere photo ops with her at his side. Nothing big. No stage center. Just visible presence. It was a risky move. A last-ditch attempt to reclaim dignity through exposure. But it never happened. Because by the time they approached the area again, security had shifted. Access was now locked down. A quiet barrier, unspoken, unmovable, stood between her and the frame once again. And then came the final humiliation. As Meghan tried to walk toward the theater doors, a staff member politely stopped her. "The screening has started. Entry is now closed." She stood still for a full 5 seconds, then nodded, turned, and walked back into the hallway, her heels echoing louder than any camera flash that night. So what do you do when even your backup plan backfires? You leave, but not with a bang, not with a statement, with a whisper. Just before midnight, Meghan and Harry slipped out a side entrance. No press. No glam. No exit shots. Gone. And less than 15 minutes later, the internet had crowned the unofficial queen of the night. A rising actress who bore a striking resemblance to Meghan, but had actually been in the center of the photo. We'll get to her soon, because her role in this story, much bigger than anyone realized. But before that twist unfolds, let's sit with the reality of this moment. A woman who had once stood atop the global stage, now found herself backstage. Literally. Figuratively. Emotionally. Tears dried. Lip gloss faded. And a plan, meticulously built, reduced to fragments. But what came next would make the snub look like a soft tap, because the real game hadn't even started yet. The question wasn't just why Meghan was blocked. It was, who wanted her gone so badly, they planned it this perfectly. It started with just one tweet. A cryptic line. No name. No context. Barely 10 words. But within minutes, it detonated across the internet like a social media IED. Former royal sobbing backstage. Not in the photo. Ouch. No hashtags. No tags. No location. But everyone knew exactly who it was about. And for Meghan Markle, who had just exited the Marty Supreme premiere humiliated, it was like the universe decided the photo snub wasn't enough. Now the world was going to watch her unravel in real time. Because what happened next wasn't just a trending topic. It was a digital feeding frenzy. And it all began with a few well-placed tweets from accounts that had been silent for months, until that night. Let's talk about the account that started it all at Starlet Insider. A throwaway handle with only a few hundred followers. Previously dormant since July. No profile picture. No bio. Yet somehow, within 6 minutes of Meghan's emotional exit from the venue, the account posted this. I just watched Meghan Markle get blocked from the main photo op. She tried to get in the shot. They moved someone in front of her. She froze. It was rough. And with that, Twitter, now X, exploded. Within 5 minutes, 1,500 likes. 10 minutes, 7,800. 20 minutes, over 20,000 shares. And the replies? Absolutely ruthless. This is giving tragic lead in an indie heartbreak movie energy. She got royally snubbed. Remember when she said, "It's not enough to survive, you have to thrive"? Yeah, about that. She should have stayed in Montecito. And then came the retweet storm. Bigger accounts, including some well-known pop culture commentators, began amplifying the thread, adding their own commentary. Been hearing for weeks that Meghan was not actually invited to pose. This tracks. The old guard of Hollywood is reclaiming space. They never wanted her there. PR stunt gone wrong. Painfully wrong. Within the hour, the hashtags were trending globally. Hashtag Marty Premiere. Hashtag Markle Meltdown. Hashtag Royal Red Carpet Rejection. But the real turning point came when a second account, one tied to a mid-level celebrity assistant, dropped a bombshell tweet. I was working the event. Meghan's team asked 3 times to get her placed in the center shot. They were told that photo is already curated. Translation, stay out. And that's when people really started paying attention. Because now it wasn't just a rumor. It was an allegation of deliberate exclusion. A Hollywood snub, planned, coordinated, and executed. Which, in PR terms, is an act of war. Inside Meghan's Montecito home, her team was watching it all unravel. Sources say her phone was lighting up nonstop. Texts from friends, DMs from semi-allies, even a few cheeky journalists pretending to check in. Saw you were trending. You okay? Hey, just saw some stuff online. Want to comment before we publish? According to one insider, Meghan's response was short. Tense. Don't engage with anyone. Damage control mode had officially begun. But the problem? The damage was already done. Because no matter how fast her team moved to spin the story, the internet had already written its own script. And in that version, Meghan wasn't a powerful duchess or savvy media strategist. She was a rejected outsider. And worse, she was being laughed at. TikTok creators jumped on it like vultures spotting fresh roadkill. One viral video reenacted the red carpet moment using Barbie dolls. One in a red dress, Meghan. Blocked by a taller Barbie in gold, Margot Robbie. The video racked up 3.6 million views in under 8 hours. Another video, viewed 5.1 million times, simply played the leaked backstage clip on loop with the caption, "She always does this." Even late-night comedians began taking swipes. Meghan Markle showed up to the premiere, but the photographers didn't show up for her. That's one way to stay out of the tabloids, by not being photographed at all. Late Night with Seth Meyers. She wore red, but the event said stop. The Daily Show. Oof. So where were the defenders? The celebrities? The friends? They sources close to Meghan that normally flood gossip columns to paint her in a softer light? Silent. Conspicuously silent. No statements. No Instagram stories. No well-timed photos of Meghan being hugged at the after-party. Because, spoiler, she wasn't at the after-party. She and Harry left before the screening even ended. And the after-party? That's where things got even messier. Because that's where the replacement photo was taken. Let's talk about that. At the after-party, a posh, candlelit affair hosted at a rooftop lounge just a few blocks from the venue. Another group shot was taken. And in that shot, a striking brunette, wearing a sleek crimson gown, stood dead center. Slightly shorter than Meghan. Hairstyled similarly. Even the same lip shade. Her name? Lena Strathmore. A fast-rising indie actress known for her roles in prestige streaming dramas and a few edgy festival hits. Not A-list. Not yet. But after that photo, her star status exploded overnight. And social media noticed something chilling. The positioning. The lighting. The smile. It looked exactly like the kind of shot Meghan had planned for herself. Almost as if someone else had been chosen to replace her. Few conspiracy theories. They had a Markle stand-in. Was this sabotage or a swap? Hollywood replaced Meghan with a newer model, in real time. People compared side-by-side photos. Bloggers analyzed the timing. One gossip account posted, Lena was a last-minute addition to the invite list. Wasn't on it a week ago. Meghan was confirmed earlier. Connect the dots. Even media insiders began whispering. Was Meghan pushed out to make space for someone else? Was this a controlled snub designed to humiliate her publicly? And if so, who orchestrated it? That's when the tweets got personal. One from a verified entertainment journalist said, "3 studios have told me privately they are distancing from Meghan. Too much drama. Too unpredictable. Too thirsty." Another, "No one wants to be in the same photo as someone whose brand is controversy without payoff." And perhaps the harshest, Meghan needs to realize, Hollywood isn't a fairy tale. It's Game of Thrones. And she just got Ned Starked. Brutal, but effective. Because that quote went viral. Even trended. Hashtag Ned Starked. Hashtag red carpet execution. Meghan had officially become a meme. Not for her fashion, not for her poise, but for her failure to reclaim the spotlight. So what did Meghan's team do? They tried to flip the narrative. That same night, a friendly tabloid ran a source quote that read, "Meghan was invited as a private guest and chose not to appear in the photo out of respect for the event's tone and focus." Cue eye rolls. Because by then, footage of her trying to enter the shot, only to be subtly blocked, had already made the rounds. The public didn't just reject the statement. They mocked it. Photoshopped memes emerged with captions like, "Meghan, choosing not to be seen again. Respectfully declining to matter. Red dress, red flag." Harsh. Definitely. But also revealing. Because this wasn't just about one photo anymore. This was about a woman trying to control a narrative. And losing to the one she couldn't edit. But here's where it gets truly sinister. 3 days after the premiere, a final tweet was posted from its Starlet Insider, the same account that started the fire. It simply read, "She was never supposed to be in the photo. That's the whole point." No context. No follow-up. Just that. And then, the account vanished. Deleted. Scrubbed. Gone. Some said it was a PR stunt. Others claimed it was a burner account for someone inside Meghan's old circle. A former friend? A bitter ex-staffer? A rival PR agent? We may never know. But what we do know is this. Those tweets, those 10-second blasts of social media sabotage, changed the narrative completely. They didn't just document the snub. They weaponized it. And what came next would make the tweets look like child's play. Because now that Meghan had been digitally dethroned, the spotlight turned to the woman who replaced her in that viral photo. And what she did next, no one saw coming. She didn't push her way into the photo. She didn't need to. Because someone guided her there. Gently, casually, deliberately. And within 24 hours, the world was calling her the new Meghan Markle. Not because she said anything. Not because she asked for it. But because she was in the frame and Meghan wasn't. This is the story of Lena Strathmore, the woman who stood exactly where Meghan Markle wanted to stand, and how one perfect photo, lit just right, timed just right, turned a rising actress into the symbol of Meghan's unraveling. Let's start with the photo. You've seen it by now. Maybe on Instagram. Maybe in Vogue's red carpet recap. Maybe on TikTok, where someone synced it to Lana Del Rey's Young and Beautiful and called it the moment Meghan realized she wasn't the moment. In it, Lena Strathmore stands between Margot Robbie and Austin Butler. Her red silk gown catches the overhead lighting just enough to look like it's glowing. She's not front and center, but she might as well be. The composition draws your eye to her first. She's laughing. Natural. Easy. Like she belongs. And Meghan? Nowhere. Not just physically absent. Erased. What made the photo sting more than anything wasn't just that Lena looked stunning. It was how similar she looked to Meghan. Same skin tone. Same bone structure. Same subtle, center-parted hairstyle. Same color gown, deep red with a side slit. It was as if someone had studied Meghan's entire aesthetic and then found a new vessel to carry it. Some people even thought it was Meghan at first glance, until they zoomed in and realized, wait a minute, that's not her. And once they realized that, they couldn't stop talking about it. So who is Lena Strathmore? And why was she placed where Meghan was supposed to be? Let's break it down. Lena, 29, is a British-American actress born in London to a theater director mother and a fashion executive father. She spent her teens in New York and trained at Juilliard. She starred in a few indie hits, nothing massive, a critically acclaimed streaming series, a minor role in a Cannes-selected drama, the kind of career that builds slowly and quietly until one viral moment turns the tide. That moment, this photo. And here's where things get suspicious. Three separate sources confirmed that Lena was not on the original Marty Supreme invite list. Her name didn't appear in any version of the leaked drafts obtained by two industry insiders. One source, who asked to remain anonymous, claimed she was added late, like within 48 hours of the event. That never happens unless someone pulls a string. So who pulled it? We don't know for sure, but we do know this. Lena is represented by Rothwell and Hyde, the same PR firm that once represented Meghan Markle until early 2024. The same firm that allegedly dropped Meghan after the Spotify deal collapsed and her image became too unstable to manage, according to an internal email leaked earlier this year. And now, they've got Lena, a rising star, uncontroversial, ambitious, stylish, and best of all, fresh. No baggage, no lawsuits, no feuds with the royal family, just potential. Exactly what Meghan used to be. Let's go back to the photo logistics. According to a photographer stationed at the event, there were 16 people slated for the main group shot. Then, at the very last minute, a 17th name was added. And guess who it was? Yep, Lena. And the most incredible part? She wasn't just squeezed in awkwardly at the edge. She was placed next to the biggest stars. Margot Robbie, Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet, all of them in frame. And in the middle of them, Lena, smiling, glowing, unbothered. Now ask yourself, in a photo that exclusive, where every pixel is curated, every angle planned, do accidents really happen? Or was Lena meant to be there? And if so, was Meghan meant not to be? The internet, as usual, picked up on the irony first. Side-by-side comparisons flooded social media. Meghan Markle walked so Lena Strathmore could strut. Same energy, less drama. They replaced the Duchess with the understudy, the new royal in red. And most damning of all, she did what Meghan couldn't: belong. Even fashion accounts jumped in. One major style blogger tweeted, "Lena Strathmore understood the assignment. Classic, elegant, zero thirst. That's how you enter Hollywood's inner sanctum." That tweet got 186,000 likes in a day. Compare that to Meghan's most recent post, which had been quietly ratioed with mocking comments about her delusional desperation. The contrast? Devastating. But it gets worse. Because while Meghan was dealing with leaked videos, public mockery, and PR damage control, Lena was quietly gaining everything Meghan had lost. Two streaming platforms reached out for meetings. A fashion house offered a front-row invite to Paris Fashion Week, and she reportedly signed a fragrance deal days later. All because of one photo. One perfectly timed shot, taken in the exact moment Meghan was wiping away tears in a hallway. The symbolism practically writes itself, and Meghan noticed. According to one insider, she saw the photo on Twitter late that night. She stared at it in silence, then said, "That was supposed to be me." But it wasn't, and never would be, because the story had moved on. Hollywood had moved on. From Meghan to Lena. Now here's the final twist. 2 days after the photo went viral, Lena gave a short, seemingly innocent interview to a fashion site. When asked how she felt standing next to such icons, she smiled and said, "Honestly, I wasn't even supposed to be there. It all happened last minute. I'm still trying to figure out how." A humble line, right? Except Hollywood insiders heard something else. They heard a calculated pivot, a subtle distancing from the chaos. Because Lena may not have planned the replacement, but she certainly knew what she was stepping into. And she stepped perfectly, right into Meghan's empty space. So what does this mean for Meghan? It means she's not just fighting the public anymore. She's fighting the narrative. A narrative that now has a new face. A cleaner face. A less controversial, more palatable version of the woman she once was. And the worst part? That narrative doesn't need Meghan's permission. It doesn't need her presence. It already exists without her. That photo was the beginning of someone else's rise. And possibly, the end of Meghan's redemption arc. But what if it wasn't just coincidence? What if Lena didn't just happen to be placed there? What if someone was behind it all, watching, planning, waiting? Because the next chapter doesn't just raise eyebrows. It points fingers. And what comes next might expose the person who engineered Meghan's downfall from behind the scenes. He was pacing, agitated, clenching and unclenching his jaw, and in his hand, a phone that he couldn't seem to put down. While Meghan was spiraling behind a velvet curtain, applying lip gloss to tears and whispering "sabotaged" under her breath, Harry was outside, furious, red-faced, and on the verge of a PR detonation. The Marty Supreme premiere wasn't just a snub. It was a public slap. And Harry, finally seeing his wife crumble in a world that once welcomed her, decided to do what he hadn't done in months. He picked up the phone and called Netflix. But before we get to the call that would send shockwaves through Sussex PR war rooms, let's rewind to understand why Harry even had Netflix on speed dial in the first place. After all, he and Meghan signed one of the most talked-about streaming deals in recent memory. A reported $100 million multi-year content agreement that was supposed to reshape their image as global storytellers. Documentaries, animated series, socially conscious content. It was all part of Brand Sussex 2.0. And for a while, it worked. Their docuseries, Harry and Meghan, dominated global streaming charts. Their truth-telling, emotional interviews captured headlines. For a moment, they weren't ex-royals. They were influencers of narrative. But then, silence. Projects stalled. Rumors of production disagreements leaked. Netflix reportedly became increasingly unimpressed, especially after Spotify terminated their deal and dubbed them grifters behind closed doors. Now, Meghan had a podcast in limbo. Harry had an eco-travel series with no release date. And the streaming giant? Growing restless. So when Meghan's red carpet moment collapsed in real time, and the internet went from mocking to brutal, Harry made a last-ditch move. He wanted Netflix to step in. He wanted leverage. Multiple eyewitnesses at the Marty Supreme event claim Harry exited the main theater and stood under a covered valet stand near the side entrance. There, pacing between two black SUVs, he began a call with someone who, sources allege, was a high-level content executive from Netflix. The call lasted 7 minutes. And it wasn't polite. "You told us this premiere was a partnership," Harry reportedly said. "You said this would position us where we need to be." There was a pause. Then, with growing frustration, Meghan was humiliated. "She flew in for this. We built content strategy around it. And now you're telling me you had no say?" Another pause. Then the killer line. "If we can't trust your team to protect our visibility, we're going to have to rethink the rest of this deal." Boom. The ultimatum. But here's the twist. Netflix didn't flinch. According to a staffer who overheard fragments of the call, the executive on the other end remained composed. Their response: "This wasn't a Netflix event. We didn't organize it. We didn't approve the photo list." Translation: "This wasn't our mess. Don't blame us for not cleaning it up." Harry, unaccustomed to being brushed off by powerful allies, reportedly responded, "We were sold on exposure. Influence. You told us we'd be supported in the narrative space." But the executive's reply was allegedly surgical. "The story has to match the audience's interest. Right now, the audience has spoken." Let's pause, because that last line, absolutely devastating. In PR language, "the audience has spoken" is code for your brand is losing traction. Your story doesn't work anymore. We're not going to fight the tide for you. And for Harry, that moment must have hit like a thunderbolt. Not just because Meghan was being ignored, but because the one platform that promised them creative power was now withholding it. Back in the car, Meghan reportedly asked, "What did they say?" Harry didn't respond immediately, just stared at the phone, then finally muttered, "They're distancing." That single word chilled the air. Because that's what Netflix was doing. Not canceling, not severing, but distancing. Silently, strategically, completely. Here's what we know now, in hindsight. Within 24 hours of the call, Netflix's social channels, which had previously flooded their timelines with Meghan's appearances, posted nothing about the Marty Supreme premiere. Not even a quiet show of support. No reposts. No archived photos. Just nothing. And that silence? It spoke volumes. Because in the digital age, absence is its own form of erasure. Later that week, Meghan's team reportedly emailed Netflix to request a supportive positioning opportunity in an upcoming project, something to counteract the snub. Their idea? A Meghan-hosted docu-style interview with Lena Strathmore, the very actress who had replaced her in the viral group photo. The concept? Two women discussing fame, identity, and legacy. Netflix's reply? A polite but firm: "We're focusing on new voices at the moment." And with that, Plan C died. Behind closed doors, Harry was livid. This wasn't just about Meghan anymore. It was about control. Because if Netflix was now declining their pitches, ignoring their pleas, and refusing to co-sign their visibility, then who exactly was Team Sussex's safety net? The answer? No one. Spotify was gone. The royal family was long gone. The public? Fickle. And now Netflix? Cooling fast. So what did Harry do? He made one more call. This time, not to an executive, but to a personal contact. A friend of a friend at a rival streaming platform. According to two separate insiders, Harry requested an informal meeting. He wanted to talk about creative autonomy. Code, again, for can we jump ship? But here's the thing. Jumping ship doesn't work when the industry has already closed the harbor. And with Meghan's snub now a meme, and their internal drama leaking out of every crack. It wasn't just Netflix pulling away. It was everyone. There's one more layer. A third party. An elephant in the room. Because while Harry was begging for photo damage control, while Meghan was in a hallway whispering sabotage, and while Lena Strathmore was being lit like a new goddess in the center of Hollywood's most powerful image, someone else was watching it all unfold. Someone who might have planned it. And as we'll soon uncover, that someone wasn't a stranger. They were closer to Meghan than anyone realized. But before we get to that plot twist, one final humiliation. The Netflix executive Harry spoke to, they reportedly ended the call with a chilling line. Just before hanging up, they said, "You still have value, but only if you let go of control." Harry froze, because that's the one thing neither he nor Meghan had been willing to do since they left the firm.